And so what I'm going to start out with is looking at what we're made up of. And we're made up of what? Chemicals. That's why that's the first level of organization, like I said on Monday. First level of what we're made up of, all these chemicals, all these atoms put together. When you put two or more atoms together, that's called a molecule, right? And so that's not life. That's not life there. Those are just chemicals. You have chemicals, all these chemicals put together, maybe within the bottle or what have you, that's not life. But if you have certain structures of those chemicals that come together in a certain way and form that structure, like I talked about Monday, which is called a plasma membrane, right? Now we get a cell. Now we have life. Life is the most basic unit of what? Life. And we have trillions of them. We're made up of all cells. That's what we're made up of. That's who we are, cells. Had to have the chemicals before that. But the cell would be what gives us life. And that's our next level of organization. Cellular organization. We talked about how, okay, but most of what our body weight is, which is that 60%, is water. So that's what most of what we're made up of, is that water, which happens to be where? Inside the cell. And where? So, talk about where's your fluid, that's where it is. Your fluid's either inside of a cell or it's where? So as we say, your intracellular fluid, and then you also have extracellular fluid. And what really needs to be maintained in homeostasis happens to be the what fluid? Yes, the outside. That's what needs to be made. That's what your body maintains. Okay? So that every single cell is okay. See, every single cell in your body is different. Right? Or slightly different. Some are similar. But all of them share the extracellular fluid. It's all of them that share that extracellular fluid that's just like this air around you right now. If you guys were all cells, the extracellular fluid is similar to the air that you breathe. And that needs to be maintained. That's what's shared between all of you, right? And that has to be maintained. That has to have the right temperature, the right type of chemical composition. All right? That's what we'll embark upon when we go a little further. All right? Very good. That extracellular fluid is considered the internal environment, right? Very good. All right? And so that's what needs to be maintained. By definition, simple. Homeostasis is the process of maintaining that internal environment, right? But within certain limits. There are limitations. You can push it too far. If it is pushed too far, now we have a patient that's in the what? Hospital with a what? See, that's it. Once your body can't do it anymore by itself, we may have to assist. All right? That's the story. And yes, we're made up of all of these cells that eventually are put together, and then you have what you call tissue. That's what tissue is. That's all tissue is. Made up of what cell? That's our next level of organization, tissue. Then you have tissues that are put together, and different ones put together to make organs. Isn't that right? And organs have their specific function. My stomach is an organ. One function, right? He does it. If he doesn't do it, I have a problem with living. Okay, all your organs have a function so that you can live. My heart is an organ. Very important function to push that blood. Don't have it there, have a problem with living. All right, but as I noted before, stomach, right? He has his function, but there's an organ right next to him, right? Which is the small intestine. Isn't that right? He just takes whatever's in him to the next place. They work together in concert. Oh, when you have organs working together, that's our next level of organization. After organ level to what? System level. See? My stomach working with small intestine and these other organs with it together create the digestive system. All right? So you have 11 systems within the human body. 11. 11 systems that have their organs within them, but those systems have to work together. You see that? And when those 11 systems work together, then you get your what? Organism, which is this beautiful spectacle you see before you. Okay, not that before you, but I'm not that before anymore. I get over it, okay. But yes, that's the process of your levels of organization, starting with chemical, starting with atoms. You have to know atoms. If you don't know atoms, then you don't know human physiology. You don't know animal physiology, right? So it starts with the chemical level. So we'll make sure we understand some principles related to that today. All right, so basically, when we look at our particular homeostatic process, and then what I'll do is I'll bring up certain terms that we haven't talked about yet, but we'll look into. We'll look into later. Do a little introduction into some terms that maybe you have heard, maybe you haven't. But don't worry too much. All right? We have to use those now just to make sure we understand the actual structures that are within what we call homeostasis. All right? And when we look at homeostasis, we see that it's made up of two different types, two different processes where you will have homeostasis. One is called negative feedback, and the other one is called positive feedback. And so we have to understand that the most dominant one, the one that's happening most of the time is your negative feedback. We're going to start with our discussion with your negative feedback, okay? As you do have positive feedback processes occurring as well, not as much as your negatives, okay? So, if we should take a look at negative feedback, we'll see that in the beginning of it all, and as I go through these parts of your different feedbacks, I want you to think about, keep in mind what we discussed on Monday related to what needs to be maintained, right? And what needs to be maintained again? Which fluid? Keep this in mind. And so what happens typically is that you change that extracellular fluid. It's changed. It's supposed to be what? Controlled. Yeah. It's supposed to be what? Controlled. See that part right there? That portion of this process, that's your internal environment, that's your extracellular fluid. And it's supposed to be controlled. You're supposed to have within a certain range the temperature. You're supposed to have within a certain range your sugar and sodium, which is salt, sodium chloride. But that's not going to happen all the time, okay? And when you don't even know, it's actually going to be uncontrolled. What made it go out of that range it's supposed to be in? A stimulus. So that's what caused it all. A stimulus did. Yeah. That stimulus is you. You caused it, okay? You drank too much of that, what? Sugar. That's all it is sugar drinks. You ate too much of that salt. Okay? You changed the range of sodium. That's the stimulus. Right? So you're the culprit. That's the beginning of the process of homeostasis. And that will change the what? Control condition. The stimulus will change the control condition. And now, we're talking about now we have our change of our internal environment. Okay. So, what we'll look at now, this is a very special part, right? We're going to now look at, oh, I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong one. We're going to now look at what is a part of a cell. And which portion of the cell? It's actually on the plasma membrane portion. So, again, plasma membrane is the actual what? Barrier that separates the cell, protects it, separates it from its external environment. Okay? And we'll peek at its composition a little later. Okay? We need to know that composition. Right? But what we have that makes it up, and I'll get into a little bit more intricate detail of it. But what it's made up of is fat. You see that? What's it made up of? Fat. I'm going to come back to that. Very important to note. And so what we're looking at then is what? Inside the cell is what? Water. And outside the cell is what? So what's separating those two, what? Those two areas of water is fat. Makes sense, right? Because, does that mix? Does fat mix with that? No. You can already see that, what you do in the kitchen. All right. Oil does not mix with water. In fact, that's the consistency of a cell membrane. Like oil versus the more solid type of water. Stick of margarine, butter that no, that's fat versus oil. You see? Both of them are lipids, but the consistency is slightly different. Okay. What makes a plasma membrane, which is oil, a little bit more sturdy, is when you add a little bit of what to it? What's the chef going to add to it? Make it a little bit more sturdy. Because it's oil. That's what plasma membranes like. Like oil. No. Just trying to see. Huh? I love it. Yeah, it's not seasoning. But I like that though. A chef does add seasoning. Well, that the chef is going to add is cholesterol. What's added to a plasma, that's what has in it. Right? So you got to have some cholesterol in there. Right? See, is all cholesterol bad? No. See, so it's used by your cells. It's just that we do what? We eat too what? Much of it. Okay. Yeah, some is good. We need it for cells so that they're sturdy, a little bit more sturdy. Okay, we'll come back. But yes, that's the plasma membrane. That fat. Except it's junky. It has what in it? It's a junky mess of what? Protein. See, there's protein that goes from the outside of it, through it, all the way in it. Yeah? All the way in it. And so what it does is it traverses the membrane. You know that word, if you didn't take anatomy physiology, it's related to transverse plane. If you just cut my body right across like that, that's a transverse cut. Transverse cut. Right? So we call these particular proteins that do that, we call them trans what are they traversing? So we call them trans what? Membrane proteins. They're proteins. We got to be specific, and we call them transmembrane proteins. They're special. They're special because what are they doing? They're sticking out the cell. You see? What they do? Stick out the cell. You see that right there. See, anything that's outside this cell, we'll see our friend there sticking out. You see that? And so that's our story. That's where our story continues with homeostasis. Because a lot of those